the deer panteth for the water, so my soul longs after thee. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship thee.
Hello friends, let us continue with the reflections on the books of Samuel. Yesterday we were speaking about the barrenness which was considered to be or interpreted to be a punishment for sin, and we have seen that barrenness is not to be considered as a punishment, and that is the case with the case of Sarah, wife of Abraham, or Hannah, mother of Samuel, or Elizabeth, wife of Zechariah in New Testament. And in another way we can say, the people who are born from such women are born for great things. That is practically the story that we can say or attribute to these historical persons. And now we continue with the text. We said, when the sacred meal was divided among the family members, that is, the meal that is cooked using the sacrificial victim which was offered to God, and it was considered to be a very sacred meal, and everybody would love to share in it, and nobody is to be kept out of it in the family circle. And hence there was a special devotion to this tradition, and everybody would participate in it, at least try to participate in it in a worthy manner. And the meal is divided among the family members according to the number of the persons involved, and usually the head of the family distributes everyone the portion. But when he has more than one wife and children in each marriage, then the portion for the children and the mother will be given to the particular person. And here, as we said, Peninnah and her 5 children, they will be given 1 share each, and therefore Elkanah would give 6 portions to Peninnah. And whereas Hannah is without children, she has the right only for 1 portion. But because of Elkanah's love for her, Elkanah used to give her 2 portions, and this would make Peninnah jealous of Hannah, and she would try to provoke her or mock at her and calling her, "You are a sinner," and so on. And this is the background of the story. Okay, and in this background, what can Hannah do? She takes refuge in the temple of the Lord, and she comes to the presence of Yahweh. Therefore, that is the outcome of the story, we can say. And therefore, now we are going to look at an important theme in the book of 1 Samuel, and that is the story narrated from verse 9 up to practically in the end of the chapter, but especially up to 18, 9 to 18. And what is narrated here? It is a beautiful narration about the life of prayer, or the best example of prayer in the Old Testament. And we will make an analysis of the elements of prayer narrated here, which will be greatly enchanting, or it will be greatly nourishing our spiritual life too, we can say. Okay, how is to understand about the prayer? We know a lot of things about prayer, but here we find the woman Hannah praying, and all the necessary elements needed for a prayer are found in Hannah's prayer. And that is the reason why we say it is the most beautiful prayer that we find in the entire Old Testament. Okay, now let us look at the text. Verse 9. After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. And sometimes we can see Hannah may not have eaten, but she remained with others in their company. That is all. And that makes sense because it is a community meal, all the family, or the family meal we can say. And she remained there. Sometimes she refused to eat, but anyhow she is going to the temple to pray. And therefore here we find Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Okay, what does it really mean? Hannah rose. Therefore that is the first element of prayer, to get up from one's own life situation. Whatever it be, one has to get up or rise above the situation. And that is the meaning of saying Hannah rose. It is not to get up from the chair where one sits or from the bed where one sleeps. That is not the meaning. But to rise up from our own life situations. That is, if I have some problems, habitual sins, I have to come out of it, or evil deeds or evil habits, I have to come out of it. And therefore, whatever be that is negative in me, I have to come out of the negative. Then only I will be able to pray. Therefore, the first thing needed for prayer is to get up. Get up from one's own life situation, whatever it be. And the second, she presented herself before the Lord. And presented herself would mean voluntary action, and that is done with full knowledge and consent. She presented herself before the Lord. It is not routinely going to the church or temple. That doesn't make sense. She knowingly went into the presence of the Lord. And when she enters the temple, she knows that Yahweh is present there, and she is now coming into the presence of the Lord. And this should be our mode of prayer too. We are to enter into the church consciously. Of course, we may be accustomed to follow the sound of the bell sometimes. When the bell is gone for mass in the church, we may rush up to the church, and it all happens as a routine. We may not even think at times that we are going to participate actively in the Holy Mass and so on. But here, what Hannah did is something very exemplary and very deep spiritually, and that is she presented herself before the Lord. Therefore, consciously entering into the realm of divinity, we can say, and that is what she did. Therefore, that makes her more acceptable to the Lord, and that is the meaning of saying presenting oneself before the Lord. Okay, therefore the two elements, to rise up and present oneself before the Lord, and it is not a matter of routine, but a conscious effort and a willful action. That is what we can say about it. And then she began to, and now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. and she did not take note of Eli sitting there. And this has another meaning. Her concentration. Okay, let us read the next verse also. So she was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made the vow. And therefore we can see she was deeply disturbed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. So she prayed and she was praying with all earnestness and also concentration. And we can say she was pouring out her heart, because we will see later when Eli asked her, "What are you doing?" Then in verse 16, "I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time." And we will see that in verse 15, "I have been pouring out my heart before the Lord." Therefore, that was what she was doing. From all this, what we can say is this. First of all, she was deeply, therefore the third element, deep concentration in prayer. And about the concentration of Hannah in her prayer, we see Eli was sitting in the temple, and naturally Hannah, when she entered the temple, Eli took notice of her. But Hannah does not take note of him, and she is distressed, and actually she is in her vexation, we can say, and therefore she is not looking around who all are in the temple or is somebody else is there. She does not look at the surroundings, but she just goes directly into the temple and into the presence of the Lord, and she is concentrating on the Lord alone, not of anything. And this has an application in our life too. How do we go to participate, for example, in the Holy Mass? Usually we can say, when we go, do we have that real concentration and active participation in the Eucharist or in the Eucharistic sacrifice? Suppose somebody asks us when we come out of the Mass, okay, was such and such a person present in the church? Definitely we would say, okay, he or she was present there or was not present there. And sometimes we may even go to the extent of narrating, she was wearing such a or this particular colored sari or dress, something like that. And what does it mean really? When I enter into the church, even though it is for prayer, I look around and watch others, how they perform, walk here and there. All these things I take note of. And what is the end result? I am distracted when I pray. But look at Hannah. She is totally concentrated on the Lord. She does not even see Eli, who is sitting on the chair. And Eli was watching her, but she does not understand it, or she does not see it practically. That's what we can say. Therefore, the third element is the deep, real concentration in the prayer. And then we see she was there, and then real prayer means pouring out the heart, and that is what we can see. And here Hannah is said to pour out her heart before the Lord, and that is what she described her prayer. In verse 15 we already saw, I was pouring out my heart. This pouring out of the heart is the real prayer that one can make. Okay, we have seen many instances of this pouring out. For example, if we are in a crisis, I am affected with a fatal sickness like cancer or something like that, I have been diagnosed about it. I came to know about it just now or recently. And in such a case, what would be my prayer style? And I may be pouring out my heart before the Lord. Or sometimes it may be one of our dear ones, one of the family members, life partner, or children, who or be. Again, we may be pouring out the heart. And while we make such a pouring out of the heart, it can happen that we may raise our voices and may even begin to question God. Why this happened to me? Why, O Lord, you have allowed me to suffer to such an extent? Just take the case of the parents who lost the only son in an accident. And these parents, they were rather nice people, good people, doing whatever good they can for others and acceptable to people around them. Such nice guys. But they happen to meet with this kind of a crisis. And if at this moment, how would they pour out their heart? And naturally, they may be tempted to ask God or question God, why, O Lord, you are putting us to test? And they may be murmuring against God and so on. And this way of reaction, it may come often, especially in case of untimely death or unrestrained situations. And we are totally in a situation that we cannot control ourselves. In these moments, what is to be said? Are they praying without faith, or are they losing their faith in God? No, never. We will find similar instances described in the Bible, beautiful prayers, but just pouring out the heart as they feel or as it comes. Look at the example of Prophet Jeremiah. We will find the so-called confessions made by the prophet in Jeremiah chapter 15 and Jeremiah chapter 20. And there we will find the prophet is practically pouring out his heart, but in that pouring out, he is challenging, questioning God. Are you deceiving me? You are greater than me, more powerful than me, and therefore you have overpowered me. You have cheated me. You are like a deceitful brook. And that is the way, or waters that fail. That is the way Jeremiah speaks against Yahweh. And therefore, seemingly it would be a blasphemous accusation. That is what we can say. But when it comes from the prophet, it is not a blasphemy. What is the reason? It is not that it comes from the prophet, but because the person is crying out to the Lord, raising these kinds of accusations against God, but at the same time confessing his trust in the Lord. He will be always saying, Lord, I believe in you. I trust in you. You are the one who sustains me. You are the one who provides for me. You are the one who always protects me. And therefore, I trust in you. But at the same time, he may continue with these kinds of murmuring questions. But that does not mean he or she is making a blasphemous statement. Therefore, pouring out the heart, it is like Jeremiah did. And Jeremiah in chapter 20, he would be asking God himself, or in his complaint, he would be cursing his own birth, his own parents. Cursed be the day that I was born. Cursed be the one who informed my father, a son is born to you. In this way of reacting to the situation, we find there will be an outpouring of the heart. We find another example in the life of Moses, and we read in Numbers chapter 11, and there we see the people around him were crying out because of hunger and thirst. And now Moses, in a way we can say, is bursting out with anger, and he raises his accusing finger against God himself, and he is challenging God. I have not conceived these people, and I have not born them. They are your people, and why don't you take care of your people, your children? They are crying out with hunger and thirst. Why don't you turn your attention to them? And he is asking or challenging God. And again we can say it was not a blasphemy, but again a prayer with a deep trust in the Lord. And we will find Job, for again another example. Job was questioning God. And how does he question? He is saying, if I had done anything wrong, explain it to me and then punish me. And therefore Job was questioning God, why are you punishing me like this? And we find towards the end of the book, in chapter 42, God appears to him and said, okay, stand like a man before me, and okay, take your position. I am going to make a trial of you. And God began the questions. Where were you when I created the heavens and the earth? Where were you when I created the mankind? Where were you when I created the sun, the moon, the stars? Where were you when I created the beings, in the living beings in the sea, or things of the sort? A flow of continuous questions. And at the end of these questions, what does Job do? He says, God, I close my mouth. I will not open it up anymore. And therefore, when God raised up these questions before Job, Job came to understand, who am I to question God? Everything is designed by him, is arranged by him, guided by him, protected by him. And then who am I to question God? And therefore, outpouring of the heart is really a beautiful prayer, a deep prayer. And since it is made with a devotion, trust in the providence of God, of course, it is one of the beautiful prayers in the Bible, or the Bible itself, we can say. And again, Jesus was challenging the Father. It was not challenging actually, but praying that the cup may pass away, but not my will, but thy will be done. Jesus' prayer. Jonah was desperate when God was testing him. We know the story. He was not ready to go to Nineveh and speak to the people, but then Jonah tried to escape from it, but Yahweh brought him back. And he went to speak, and Jonah sat down to see the destruction of Nineveh. We read the prophet Jonah. And then Lord decided not to destroy the city because the city was converted. The people became contrite. Hence, he did not destroy. This practically made Jonah angry, and he began to question God. And what's the reason? Jonah's words became vain. He announced within 40 days the city will be destroyed. But now God decides not to destroy the city. Why? The people are converted and they have come back to the Lord, and therefore they are spared. But Jonah now feels he had spoken and his words have become vain, and therefore he got angry with the Lord. The people will challenge him and would mock at him. You proclaim that the city of Nineveh will be destroyed, but where is the destruction? Therefore, you were speaking without any basis. It was not actually the revelation or the word of Yahweh. You found it out by yourself. And that was the way people would have commented about Jonah. And therefore, he was really irritated and angry because God decided not to destroy the city. And when Lord appears to him, Jonah makes his complaint. I knew that you were a God slow to anger, abounding in mercy, and rich in compassion. Therefore, because of these attributes, Jonah refused to go and preach because his words will become vain and people will be converted when he goes to them preaching about the will of God. And therefore, this is the situation that we find. And many a time we will find this kind of outpouring of the heart, which is the real prayer. And therefore, this is the fourth element, pouring out the heart before the Lord. And now the fifth element we can say, the intensity of prayer. Okay, Hannah was praying so intensely that she forgot the whereabouts. And she was really concentrating on Yahweh and on her need. And this intensity and concentration can be explained like this: forgetting oneself, forgetting the surroundings, and immersed or being immersed in the Lord. She was praying, forgetting herself, forgetting the surroundings, and being immersed in prayer or immersed in the Lord. She was pouring out her heart. This is the real intense prayer, or a prayer with a concentration. And that is the way we can say they are going to make their prayer. And this kind of intense prayer, surely Yahweh will accept it, no doubt about it. And okay, and to explain further this concentration, we can say, when I am able to concentrate on the Lord, I will be able to see or enter into the realm of divinity a little bit further, or go deeper into the realm of divinity. And sometimes people would say, such a concentration, is it possible for us? Okay, intense concentration is possible, but we will have to pay the price. I just remember one story that was read in a book. Okay, it can be explained like this: a man who is living in a village and he has his house in the middle of the paddy field, and once he went out of the house to buy something for shopping, and it was already evening. By one or other matter, he was a little bit delayed, and by the time he came back, it was already dark, and by 7 o'clock in the evening, the power cut will come. That is, the power will be off, and then it will be totally dark. And he has to walk through the narrow walk path in the paddy field, and when it is dark, it is really difficult to walk. And not only that, there could be also the problem with the snakes. And therefore, he was rushing to his house, and it was already getting dark. And he came by 7 o'clock, the time for power cut, came to the house, and just as he opened the door of the house, switched on the light, and immediately the lights went off. Power cut began. But in that flashing moment, he saw one thing: a snake crawling and passing through the room in which he was just placed his foot. And what can he do? He is really terrified. He does not know what kind of snake it is, and the snake is inside the room, and he has just stepped into the room. And what can happen? Therefore, he remains still for some time, and then there is something special that takes place. After a few minutes standing without any motion, he comes to see that he can see in the midst of that darkness. It's a little bit, at least he can see. And this is explained by the author like this. And in the intense darkness, he begin to see slightly, and he will hear even the slightest noise. And therefore, it is a choice between life and death for him. He concentrates himself to such an extent that he can hear the least of the noise, and he can see even in the midst of darkness. Okay, therefore, this is what we can say about the concentration. And we will continue with the reflection tomorrow. Okay, thank you.
Almighty God, we thank you for inspiring us to read your scriptures and to meditate upon them day and night. Relying on all your promises, we humbly implore that the words of scripture may also be not just signs on a page, but channels of grace into our hearts. Amen.